Before the video begins, I'd like to address that this video will contain spoilers, but please enjoy. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask was first released on the Nintendo 64 in 2000. It was remade on the Nintendo 3DS in February 2015 under the title Majora's Mask 3D, but in this video, I'll mainly be discussing the N64 version. Majora's Mask is the sequel to the first 3D Zelda game, Ocarina of Time. It happens to use the same game engine, and as well as this proves to blatantly reuse many graphic resources seen in OOT. Majora's Mask is the 6th main installment of the Legend of Zelda series, and in addition to this, it's one of the only Zelda games which does not feature either Ganon or Zelda within the gameplay. Unless, you count this cutscene. After the release of Ocarina of Time, Shigeru Miyamoto was planning to release another version of the game for the Nintendo 64 disk drive with remade dungeons. The disk drive increased console memory and increased the game's visuals. This expansion would take Ocarina of Time and alter the level design, similar to how the Master Quest expanded upon Ocarina of Time. However, Onuma did not like Miyamoto's idea of remaking the old dungeons, so he started work on new ones instead. Upon asking Miyamoto if he could make a new game, Shigeru Miyamoto's response was that if it could be done in 1 year, then it was worth doing. With having such a small team on this new game, Onuma understood that the game would need to be a smaller scope than Ocarina. He was aware that supporters would be let down by a less ambitious game though. To bridge the gap between fan expectations and the team's limited finances, Onuma sought guidance from one of his fellow Ocarina directors, Koizumi. Yoshiaki Koizumi helped give Onuma the idea of a replayability function. One in which time passes where the same events could be played over and over again. Ergo, this was the creation of the 3-day system in Majora's Mask. In regards to this mechanic, the game was originally going to revolve around the span of an entire week. However, it was then dulled down simply because of how challenging the task of remembering each character's different schedules would have been. In Ocarina of Time, the idea of masks was not fully fleshed out. However, these masks were merely used as an extra side quest to allow you to speak to the Gossip Stones around Hyrule. So understandably, Onuma decided to further expand this concept in Majora's Mask. The game begins as Link, during his search for his long-lost friend Navi, is ambushed by the Skull Kid and both his fairy companions Tattle and Tail. We see Skull Kid wearing a mysterious mask, yet without much time to observe, he hops on our horse Epona and steals her from us. Link pursues and is led to a trap. Skull Kid here curses Link with the transformation of a Deku. Once this is done, the Skull Kid flees, oblivious to the fact that he leaves one of his fairy partners behind. With having no choice, Tattle is used as a guide for Link to find his way into Clock Town. On their way to the town, they cross paths with the Happy Mask salesman. He claims to have owned the mask that the Skull Kid had placed on his face and promises our hero that if he can recover the mask, then he will break his curse. Link agrees, and shortly after, the 3-day deadline is shown to the player, leaving a sense of fear and dread to those that play. However, Link manages to find his way up to the top of the clock tower and receive the Ocarina of Time. Unfortunately though, he fails to retrieve the mask back from the imp. With doing so, once Link goes back in time and mistakenly believing that Link recovered the mask, the Happy Mask salesman releases Deku Link for his curse, transferring its power into a reusable mask. The merchant then goes into a fit of rage, realizing that the mask was not yet in safe hands, and he explains that the mask that the Skull Kid is wearing is none other than the game's namesake, the Majora's Mask. In his duel with Majora's puppet Skull Kid, Tattle explicitly names the 4 key locations found inside the game and orders the heroes to go in search of the mysterious beings that are found there. Upon progressing, Link also learns that Skull Kid cursed Termina as revenge for feeling abandoned by his giant friends. Tattle and Tail befriended and accompanied him in his games. That would eventually lead to the theft of the mask, which has been corrupting him ever since. Link and Tattle head to the temples found deep inside Woodfall, Snowhead, Great Bay, and Ikanya Canyon. They defeat the boss in each dungeon, claiming the cursed masks from the bosses and freeing each giant upon temple completion. Link summons these giants on the eve of the carnival and they prevent the moon from collapsing. Link pursues Majora as it departs from Skull Kid and enters the moon. After this, Link defeats Majora's Mask and the moon vanishes. While the Happy Mask salesman retrieves the non-powerless Majora's Mask, Link, the fairies, and the giants all happen to make amends with the Skull Kid. The Carnival of Time opens with its participants celebrating Link's success in saving the land, and then finally the game pans to a drawing of the Skull Kid and his friends on a tree stump in a nearby forest, which I would only assume to be Kokiri Forest. With an ending like that, you'd think this game was all bright and cheerful, right? Wrong. This game is fucked, but that's mainly one of its highest points for praise when you hear someone speak of Majora's Mask. The game's darker tone, time travel mechanic, and the use of masks to transform Link on the move were innovative departures from the series' norms, making it appear far more distinct in comparisons to the other games of the franchise. With Majora's Mask being made with the same engine used in Ocarina of Time, multiple assets are transferred over. Contributing to this fact would be the characters present in the game. A lot of character models were shamelessly reused, whilst others were fresh, brand new NPCs that were never introduced before. Both of these things are positives. Players who experienced Ocarina of Time would find comfort in recognizing characters. This helps the player having already established a connection with these lovable characters already. Though with that said, in Majora's Mask, characters from Ocarina of Time do not remember Link, despite his previous heroic deeds. This narrative choice stems from Termina being set in a parallel world or a separate reality. It is possible that events from one world doesn't directly translate to the other. This includes Link's accomplishments. As briefly described earlier, the 3-day mechanic is a time constraint that consists of a 3-day limit. In real time it only accumulates to around 54 minutes, but with a song that can slow down time, it can easily be found out that with some pre-planning, more than enough time is actually given. On screen, a digital clock displays the time and date just to give the player an indication of time left. This would be needed for any time-precise side quests or events that take place at certain times during the cycle. By playing the Song of Time on the Ocarina of Time, Link can go back to the first day at 6 AM. If he doesn't act before the 72 hours are up, the moon will demolish Termina and Link will lose everything he has worked so hard to achieve. There will be a real-time countdown when only 6 hours remain. Returning to the dawn of the first day, the player's progress is saved and major accomplishments are permanently kept. Examples being the collection of maps, masks, music and weapons. However, cleared puzzles, keys and minor items such as bombs and arrows, they'll all be lost, as well as any rupees that are stored in your wallet. As well as this, practically every single character will now have no recollection of ever meeting Link, which in turn resets any possible side quest's progression. Meaning this sort of progression will need to be redone with a whole new cycle. This requires full attention from the player. An example to why I say this is because of the Deku Scrub Playground minigame. This minigame requires you to beat the record for each of the days in one cycle. If you forget to do that even one of those days, you have to reset the cycle and do it again. Doing side quests or progressing with dungeons in between these minigames could risk the player completely forgetting about revisiting the playground to finish off each of the daily challenges. And not only that, but this minigame isn't the only example of this. The Husband and Darling minigame features the exact same mechanic, and in my first playthrough when revisiting the game, I took my photograph for the Boat House contest and forgot to revisit before the contest ended. This was simply because I was trying to finish off the temple and completing the numerous side quests sprawled throughout the swamp. Then again, such large options of what to do adds to the game's overall excitement and adds to the game's replayability. The only thing is that this feature can also be rather overwhelming, and is made more frustrating when little things like this are simply forgotten during gameplay. Unlike the sprawling and more open Hyrule Field from Ocarina of Time, Termina Field is a tad bit more compact and concentrated. This deliberate design choice encourages players to explore more thoroughly and pay attention to the details within the smaller space. On topic of the details in this renowned space, I must personally admit it is so much better than Hyrule Field from OOT. Hell, it's better than most hub locations in the franchise. Take Twilight Princess for example. This iteration of Hyrule Field was filled with a whole bunch of more or less nothingness. Just a few bugs and a couple heart pieces, a few basic enemies and a whole lot of trees. The music in this section was fucking great though, so I guess that gets it off the hook. The Termina of Majora's Mask is riddled with high enemy variety, secrets and clear environmental changes, with the north side being covered in snow, the western area covered in sand, the southern area filled with tall grass making it blend in more with the grassland and swamp area, and finally, the section most eastern is near the entrance to Akana and is surrounded by several stone pillars. The only other game I can think of with a similar level or world progression would be Super Metroid, with its broad change in scenery before the atmosphere in an area can even come close to becoming tiresome. This just helps with my point that the hub used in Majora's Mask is very good, and even with this, the music here is a fucking godsend. Majora's Mask does what any respectable Zelda game would do. It throws you headfirst into a land filled with oddball characters, quirky side quests, and a time loop that will eventually have you scratching your head pondering on a reasonable schedule to play a certain day in. You'll strut around as Link as he rocks his stylish transformation masks. I'll discuss these masks in depth later on. Putting it briefly, you have 3 transformation masks. You've got your Deku Scrub, which turns you into a sprightly plant person, the Goron making you a boulder rolling powerhouse, and then finally the Zora turning you into the envy of all aquatic life as a fish person with boomerang scales. It's like a magical costume party with a slight dash of depression. Clock Town is the largest town in Termina and is the region's centre of government and commerce, each named after one of the 4 cardinal directions on a compass, hence the North Clock Town, South Clock Town, etc. Clock Town is completely surrounded by tall walls. There are only 4 entrances into and out of town, and they are all constantly guarded by soldiers. However, there is a small secret entrance through a tunnel from East Clock Town to the Astral Observatory. This location doesn't help you escape, but it is worth noting as it is quite a key place at the beginning of the game. Termina Field is the central area of the overworld of Termina. This area leads into and out of the 4 gates of Clock Town. Termina Field is the main hub which allows the player access to every key site seen in the main game. Examples being the Mountain Village, Akana Canyon, the Southern Swamp, Great Bay Coast, Milk Road, and so on and so forth. Without Epona, it is impossible to access the west and east districts because of gates encountered along the way. The northern region's entrance is obstructed by ice, thus Link needs the boat to access it. The route to the southwest is also obstructed by a huge rock that can only be removed with the aid of a powder keg, unless Link waits until the final day when the boulder will be eliminated by a man who tolls in and day out to remove it. This being the case makes an important side quest in which Epona's song can be retained not possible without the powder keg. I'm going to go back to Super Metroid again for this comparison, as it also does the same thing, tantalizing players with a way of progression just slightly out of the player's reach. It is only until the player returns later on in both Majora's Mask and Super Metroid to where the player can finally further progress. The Southern Swamp is home to the Deku Scrubs and is ruled by the Deku King, who resides in the Deku Palace. That's a lot of Dekus. When Link first enters the Southern Swamp, the water is made toxic by the curse of the Woodfall Temple. Upon beating the temple, the toxic water is restored and made into normal water once again. The Southern Swamp Swamp Tourist Guide, which hosts a special boat tour, is located right in the middle of the swamp. However, this cruise has been put on hold since Kume, the person in charge, has vanished. The boat cruise will be put back in service when Link finally saves the frail, disgusting, ugly, elderly woman from the Woods of Mystery, and he uses the free token on the boat cruise to travel to the Deku Palace. Snowhead Mountain Village is home to Zubora and Gebora. These are blacksmiths who are able to upgrade Link's sword. The sword takes 2 upgrades, once to the Razor Sword and second to the Gilded Sword, one of my personal favourites in the series. In the Goron Village, the Goron Graveyard is also present. This is the resting place of the Great Darmani. This can be found high above a cliff. Snowhead Mountain is made a threat to anyone who stumbles too far unequipped. This is the location that Darmani lost his life due to being blown away by the strong chilly winds. Snowhead is also home to the Goron Racetrack, which is very fun but frustrating due to how difficult the minigame is. The Great Bay Coast is a seaside beach located directly west of Termina Field. It is home to numerous landmarks, and this ocean location is also well populated with Zoras. It used to be very much an enchanting sea paradise, but in an unfortunate turn of events the pirates have been led to this place, being a rather dreaded area for its inhabitants. The pirates can be found to the far east side of the coast. It is up to Link to gain entry inside the fortress and infiltrate it to retrieve the stolen eggs. It is a vast structure on tight guard, so the player needs to keep well hidden and concentrated in order to succeed in this rescue mission. Akana Canyon is known to be a cursed land where the Akana Kingdom once existed, being home to the dead and filled with spirits who linger with regret and hatred. Numerous spots are found within Akana, examples being the well, the ancient castle, the spring, the music house, and finally the graveyard. The mysterious graveyard found inside Akana is one that is vastly similar to the Kakariko village graveyard seen in Ocarina of Time. Just like the Kakariko village graveyard, the odd gravekeeper Dampe patrols the area. There are 24 masks that can be acquired and selected on the pause menu. Certain masks offer specific advantages depending on the situation at hand. For example, the Great Fairy's mask proves useful for collecting stray fairies within the 4 temples, whilst the Bunny Hood enhances Link's mobility by increasing his movement speed. The Stone Mask, on the other hand, possesses the ability to render Link invincible to the NPCs and adversaries. With this, other masks with relatively lower utility typically find their purpose within optional side quests or unique scenarios. An example being the Postman's Hat, which enables Link to access contents within mailboxes, and Kafei's Mask, the catalyst for one of the most thrilling and highly praised side quests that culminates in acquiring the couple's masks by reconnecting 2 lovers. Collecting every mask in the game culminates to the unlock of the Fierce Deity Mask. Upon equipping this mask, Link grows to over double his normal height and changes into a white tunic with war paint on his face. Fierce Deity Link's sword is a helix shape, it shoots beams at enemies and is genuinely just fucking awesome. Whilst the masks in Ocarina of Time tend to be limited to an optional side quest with no special enhancements, the same obviously cannot be said for their counterpart in Majora's Mask. This is as they play quite a crucial role. And amongst the 24 masks found in the game, there are 3 major transformation masks. This is without the exception of the Fierce Deity Mask. Link can change into other species at any time. The Deku Mask turns Link into a Deku Scrub, the Goron Mask into a Goron, the Zora Mask into a Zora. Each form has its own special skills. Zora Link can swim much faster than normal Link, throwing his fins like a boomerang, dolphin dive, and walk on the bottom of bodies of water. Deku Link can perform a spin attack, shoot bubbles, skip on water, and fly for a brief period by launching from Deku Flowers. Goron Link can roll at high speeds, punch with great force, ground pound, walk on lava without taking damage, and weigh down heavy switches. Only by using these skills will you be able to enter many locations, an example being Snowhead where ramps are present. This means that only Goron Link can pass, this is with the use of his roll ability. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask introduces several key items to Link's arsenal that aid him on his quest to save the land of Termina. The transformation masks in Majora's Mask offer a different approach to the gameplay compared to the traditional arsenal of tools found in other Zelda games. They allow Link to navigate through the world in various ways, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. A noteworthy aspect in regards to the use of items is how there are some weapons that previously Link could only use as an adult in Ocarina of Time, but he can now use them as a child in Majora's Mask. A tiny nitpick also being that the weapons arsenal is made a tad bit smaller, having items like the boomerang, slingshot, the free spells in Ocarina of Time all being dismissed. However, it isn't really that huge of a problem at all. The spells were lame and the slingshot was easily replaced by the bow. Thinking about it now, well, Zora Link has the boomerang fins, but I still just don't think it looks as cool. These slots were taken up by the Picto Box, Powder Keg, and side quest items like letters, so at least the space was still used up. Nestled within the murky depths of the southern swamp, the Woodfall Temple sets the tone with its eerie yet intriguing ambience. The temple revolves around the themes of nature and toxic water, boasting puzzles that involve water skipping, burrowing into Deku plants to gain height, utilizing torches to burn away obstacles, and some relatively simple platforming. The rooms really offer a lot of variety, and the puzzles are quite challenging. The temple can mainly be considered straightforward with how progression is made in each room. Not really any backtracking has to be done in order to complete it. The boss in this temple is great, whilst the mini-boss is nothing too special. It is a brilliant introduction dungeon. Perched atop the icy Snowhead Mountains is none other than the Snowhead Temple. This dungeon presents us with a huge vertical climb throughout the entire dungeon, and also blends the elements of fire and ice. This requires players to utilize Link's Goron form to roll through snow-covered slopes and melt ice barriers with the fire arrows. When the bottom floor of the main room rises, it obstructs the entrance to the main boss room on the 3rd floor. Thus, Link in Goron form must break the weakest segments of the floor's base to be able to enter certain rooms. This includes the boss room. A lot of the puzzles in this section were rather enjoyable, pretty much all puzzles being relatively easy to figure out. Quite a bit of backtracking will be done in this temple. This is mainly for stray fairies or for ice blocks, which haven't yet been melted. Overall, pretty good dungeon. The Great Bay Temple plunges players into a watery realm of complexity. Puzzles involve manipulating water currents, utilizing the Zora's swimming mechanics, and the use of the multiple water valves, so the functionality of the water-based elevators help Link reach new places. The key item found in this dungeon are the ice arrows, which Link can acquire after defeating the mini-boss War in a pretty sweet boss fight. The ice arrows are also essential to navigate certain areas by means of freezing the surface of deep water, and even some enemies can be used as platforms. I mentioned in my Majora's Mask 3D review how I thought this temple was relatively straightforward and linear. This isn't really true at all. Replaying the game, I actually managed to find myself exploring the dungeon a whole lot more. I happened to pass through familiar rooms quite frequently. This was both by accident through getting lost or just in order to make sure no stray fairy or chests were left behind. But this temple has some great puzzles, and even now it is still a very enjoyable dungeon for me. Unlike the other 3 dungeons in the game, the Stone Tower Temple requires the use of all 4 of Link's forms: Hylian, Deku, Goron, and Zora. In contrast to the undead and Gyros, Stone Tower Temple does not reflect the same depressive mood seen in the outside world of Termina. However, it's quite the opposite, with this temple revolving around light and the key items the light arrows and the mirror shield. These mystical arrows can be used to turn the dungeon and the whole of Stone Tower upside down. What this does is make the entire dungeon far more difficult. Each room flips and becomes twisted to what was seen previously. However, the music found in this temple is so good. The atmosphere is great and the puzzles are challenging, easily making it the most rewarding to complete. The Garo mini-boss fight is the best in the game, having an intricate moveset, beautiful design, and a very cool exit to the battle. The boss isn't so good, but besides from this, it's another very solid dungeon. In Majora's Mask, located in the 4 dungeons of 15 hidden stray fairies. When collected, they combine their mystical energy to enhance Link's capabilities. The one in Woodfall gives you the Great Spin, the one in Snowhead gives you a full-sized magic meter, the one in Great Bay gives you double defense, and finally the one near Stone Tower grants the Great Fairy Sword, which shamelessly reuses the same Bigoron sword animation from Ocarina of Time. But it's okay, because the sword design is fucking awesome. Anyway, the Great Fairy's mask given by the Great Fairy in Clocktown allows the player to check if a room has hidden fairies remaining in it, and it also attracts any fairies that are loose. The inclusion of the stray fairies within the dungeon serves a twofold purpose. Collecting them not only helps to improve Link's arsenal through the upgrades and items that he acquires, but it also fosters a deeper sense of exploration and engagement with the intricate environments. By encouraging players to thoroughly scour each dungeon for these elusive fairies, Majora's Mask encourages a holistic approach to puzzle solving and rewards diligence with newfound strengths and abilities. In the Nintendo 64 version of the Woodfall Temple boss fight, Link can use his sword, arrows, bombs, and the Deku Mask. Everything Link has at his disposal can be used, however the remake only lets Link use the Deku Mask, even though the only thing that works is burrowing into a Deku flower and attacking from above. Odolwa is challenging, fun, and engaging in his Nintendo 64 incarnation. Coming into the boss fight unprepared can result in a tough encounter, especially if the player still only has 3 hearts by this point. Odolwa's design is incredible, and his haunting chant still makes me uneasy to this day. Chasing Goat around the boss arena is exciting, and he's especially durable. It's the only boss fight in the game where taking too much time can have serious consequences. Couple that with an already energetic battle, and it's hard not to consider Goat as one of the game's best bosses considering the design, movement pattern, and the difficulty of the fight. The Georg boss fight in the Great Bay Temple is what I would consider pretty decent. Georg can easily move across a large portion of the boss arena with little to no effort, so it's mostly just a back and forth that feels tense. Whilst this is rather plain, the design of Georg is great, and him being made far more of a threat underwater makes the player be wary of staying out of its way. In the 3DS version, an entire second half of the battle takes place underwater, which doesn't make it that much better, but it does make the fight last longer. The twin mold boss fight in Majora's Mask is unfortunately one of the problems with Stone Tower. Such an incredible dungeon that leads to such an underwhelming boss fight. Yet with this said, the fight is without a doubt an incredible spectacle, with its primary purpose being to show off how impressive the Giant's Mask could make Link look in a 3D space. Twin Mold was already the worst boss in the game, but unfortunately the 3DS remake mangles the boss fight considerably, making the boss basically unkillable. The final boss in the game does not stay true to the original Zelda fashion, with instead of the boss being Ganon, it's the game's namesake, Majora, or Majora's Mask. Link's first battle with Majora makes great use of his long-range weapon, the bow. Still, things only get more chaotic when halfway through all the boss masks Link has collected turn on him. This ends up leading to an incredibly chaotic battle that can quickly kill unprepared players. The fight consists of Majora having 3 different forms, each being enjoyable to fight. They are all quite challenging, and the final form especially will grant the player a fairly strong battle. This is of course without the fierce deity mask. This makes the fight an absolute joke, but in exchange, the mask is extremely fun to use and the beams that come from the Helix Sword are a pleasing visual. Majora's Mask for the Nintendo 64, despite the technical limitations of its era, stands as a testament to the artistic prowess of its creators. The game's visual design masterfully captures the eerie and melancholic atmosphere of the world of Termina. From the delicate glow of Clock Town at sunset to the haunting majesty of the moon looming overhead, each setting is meticulously crafted to evoke a range of emotions. The low-poly character models and environments are surprisingly effective in conveying the game's distinct aesthetic, immersing players in a world teetering on the edge of chaos. The animation is also remarkable in this game, with enemies, bosses, and characters having new moves and individual designs. A great example in regards to quality of animation and Nintendo's attention to detail would be Link's idle animations. In Snowhead, Link gets cold, squints his eyes, and then sneezes. This only happens in the cold locations of the game, whilst in the normal areas, Link is just shown to warm up as his idle animation. This is a great design choice and I very much like it. Good job, Nintendo. The audio landscape of Majora's Mask is an auditory marvel. The haunting melodies and atmospheric compositions by Koji Kondo amplify the game's emotional depth and immerse players into its unique world. The eerie ambience of the portal, the depressing vibe given off by the Song of Healing, and the sense of urgency from the clock's ticking all contribute to the game's emotional resonance. The subsequent release of Majora's Mask on the 3DS introduced a fair few mixed opinion enhancements that expanded upon the original N64 version. Amongst the positives are the boasting of a much smoother frame rate, high quality character models, and enhanced lighting effects. However, whilst the 3DS version shines in graphical fidelity, it also introduces a subtle shift in art direction. Some fans, including myself, argue that the updated graphics, whilst crisper and more vibrant, lack the darker, more melancholic tone that characterized the N64 original. The Nintendo 3DS version's slightly more cartoony aesthetics without a doubt are much more visually pleasing. They're my favourite in the franchise, but it also happens to dilute the oppressive atmosphere that contributed to the game's unique charm. In Majora's Mask, you'll be made to save poor defenseless cows from aliens, mend broken hearts, or try to understand the very little intricacies involved in moonwatching just to score some nifty rewards. It's safe to say that the side quests are what add to the game's replayability. Whilst if you're not completely interested in the side quests, it is still worth playing Majora's Mask. This being because these mini side quests make the game something similar to a soap opera, but on steroids. In essence, whilst Majora's Mask can be easily completed without engaging in side quests, The true richness and diversity of the experience lie in these additional narratives. The side quests act as a bridge between players and the characters they encounter, forging a connection that transcends the core plot. They serve as a testament to the game's legacy, offering a comprehensive exploration of the world that goes far beyond a singular focus. The 3DS port of Majora's Mask is completely riddled with bugs. I'll admit I still love that game, but in comparison to the Nintendo 64 port, the experience isn't anywhere near as enjoyable. The alterations made to the different playable species made the 3DS port harder to recommend because of how frustrating it made gameplay. This is why in my old review it received quite a low rating for a game in the Zelda franchise. Deku skipping was made far slower, having distance become shorter with each jump and having the exit to the Deku Butler's shrine almost unescapable. If the player fails to reach a lily pad on the way back to the palace, they are sent back to this shrine, in which the escape is more or less unreachable. This mechanic has been completely butchered, and this section was made far more unforgiving and unfair. The Zora swimming is the most notable change in Majora's Mask N64. We had never seen Link so quick underwater. Having mastered the Zora swimming fuels the player with a great feeling of satisfaction. However, this new updated swimming is not good, with the normal and quick swimming in this game both being slower than in the original, and with it also now consuming magic, it makes the player feel as if this new magic using swimming is a bad thing and shouldn't be used, as magic needs to be very heavily conserved in the Great Bay section. Though it's not all bad, because the 3DS version had 2 new fishing spots introduced. Yay! These new fishing locations bring quite literally no positive into the game, and they don't really reward the player either. All jokes aside, among the few major 3DS version's standout additions, the inclusion of gyroscopic aiming proved to be a game changer. This innovation allowed players to use the 3DS's motion controls to precisely aim Link's projectiles, providing a more aversive and intuitive combat experience. Gyro aiming is a control method that uses motion sensors in your device to help you aim. Essentially, this feature allows you to aim in first-person shooter games by simply tilting the controller instead of using the traditional joystick method. The game sold approximately 314,000 copies in its first week of sales in Japan, and has sold 3.36 million copies worldwide, fewer than its predecessor, which sold over 7 million copies. The game received generally favourable reviews, which indicates that it was well received by the critics. However, there are various arguments over whether it is on par with its predecessor, Ocarina of Time. For me personally, Ocarina is the best Zelda game. With its far more convenient save mechanic and less annoying enemies, I would say I prefer it by a pretty decent margin. However, Majora's Mask is easily following in second place. Majora's Mask is a fantastic game. It stands as a unique and bold departure from the traditional conventions of the Zelda series. The game's dark themes, innovative mechanics, memorable characters, and emotional storytelling combine to create an experience that lingers in the minds and hearts of players long after the final credits roll. And with that said, my final rating for Majora's Mask for the Nintendo 64 is a 9.6 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and I'm sorry that there has been over a 2-week gap between videos. Obviously this video has been the longest one I've made so far, but I've also been busy with work and family. Thanks again.